sure that we take that content, drive it through the week as much as we possibly can, really have the conversation on how do we apply it practically, make sure that we're available for questions and answers, have some great discussion as a panel. And as I say panel, I've got two joining with me this afternoon, this evening. Thank you both for joining with us. I've got Sid Harrison, who's a graduate of CAU here locally, actually a graduate of School of Ministry in Wyoming and SLT, I should correct myself. Sid is our Green Team host here at Church Alive. And then we also have Ryan Ortiz. He's going to represent the youth. He loves the young adults. He's passionate about the youth and young adults. Loves spending time with them. And so I invited Ryan to join with us because, hey, he's going to give us a little bit of an angle of making sure that we're speaking in a way that the youth can understand too. So, gentlemen, welcome to Take Two. So glad to have you both.
Thank you.
This is going to be kind of a fun adventure. Obviously, this Sunday we kicked it off. We kicked off a brand new series. The series was called The One, Leaving the 99. And so we spent some time in a parable that Jesus shares. In Luke chapter 15, we went through verses 1 through 7. A couple key points before I hand it off and just run into discussion. We had a few big ideas available. I really wanted to pursue these three concepts. God notices the one, God pursues the one, and God rejoices over the one. God's heartbeat is for the one. He notices, he pursues, he rejoices when the lost are found. And if we share God's heart, we'll move beyond that comfort zone, kind of get out of the walls of the church to some degree, pursue people personally, because I know so many of us, we have people in our lives that others will never come in contact with. You got friends, you got family, you got coworkers, you got classmates, you got loved ones, you've got so many that you can tap into and celebrate that transformation. So as we were talking, I'm going to kind of start the conversation. Sid, immediately after service on Sunday, as we reflected on the 99, which obviously we're talking about sheep, right. You brought out an interesting point, and I wanted to give you room to talk about that.
Yeah, and it just kind of as we were closing Sunday, we were talking about Jesus the Good Shepherd, Jesus leaving the flock, seeking the one, Jesus being our peace, being our protector, some of those things. And it just reminded me that David is a young man, especially it talks about that as he was talking to King Saul when they were facing Goliath. Even when Samuel went to go anoint David, he was in the field with the flock, and he was guarding the sheep, and now he's in front of Saul. We're facing Goliath. He says, but I've killed the lion and I've killed the bear. I've tended the flock. I've spent my time writing psalms, praising God, tending the flock, in the field with the flock, saving the one from the lion and the bear. And that just really spoke to me like a shadow of Jesus.
Yeah.
Jesus went to the cross to be slain for us so that we don't have to deal with the lion and the bear, not like we did in the Old Testament. So
sure.
Just some of those thoughts on that shadow of Jesus to come, that we see that in the Old Testament.
Yeah, absolutely. By the way, we have this live, and we have it live intentionally, so you can reach out just like it's a Sunday morning service. You can hop in our chat. We want to hear your questions specifically on Sunday's message, the 99. We want to focus on that content, make sure that hits home really well. But if you're on Facebook, if you're on YouTube, if you're on Subsplash, or you're here with us live, and you've got questions, we want to maximize that time and make ourselves available for that. But I'm going to shift gears over here. Ryan, what jumped out at you over the course of Sunday? Is there anything specific that jumped out relative to the 99, or leaving the 99 for the one?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, this is going to be very broad, very general, but just the idea of leaving the 99 for the one. And I think that you kind of encompassed it well. If that doesn't mean like we abandon our family and our friends, but it does mean that we chase after, we pursue, we seek after those who are not walking in a relationship with Christ. And that's what really resonated with me on Sunday.
Yeah, absolutely. What was hitting me is when you were coming back to the thinking about David. Ironically, I was on my walk this morning, and this is another great reason that we do take two, is because a lot of times whoever's speaking, they don't hit every single component of the subject matter at hand. Many times you go on a walk and you're like, how did I not catch this? I was on my walk, and one of the things that I pray out in my prayer time as I'm walking is Psalm 23. I should probably just pull it out and just read it. It'd probably be the easiest thing to do. I might have had that ready if I really thought about that. It says this: the Lord is my shepherd. I think that ties right off the bat. I shall not be in want. He makes me lie down. This shepherd, the good shepherd, makes me lie down in green pastures. This shepherd leads me beside still waters. This shepherd restores my soul. The shepherd leads me in paths of righteousness for his name's sake. And yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, we will fear no evil. For you, the good shepherd, are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies, and you anoint my head with oil. My cup runs over. These are the words of David, going back to David that you were just talking about. This is a psalm that he cried out, that he cried, surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. So even from the very get-go, even from the time of David, you see this component of shepherd, of that concept very much. And I would have liked to have gotten in a little bit more detail, and would have liked to have talked a little bit more about sheep and how they like to go astray. I guess I hit it just a little bit where, they like to graze, and we can do that with sin so much. Sin can kind of just make us wander off and just take us to places that we didn't intend to, and then we look up. It's like, oh, hey, where's the rest of the flock? I don't know where they went. So I guess maybe I did hit that a little bit better, but I think one other thing, too, I wanted to highlight and wanted to get you guys' input on this is before we even get going in Luke 15, you've got two people there. You've got the religious people of the day, and you've got the tax collectors, and you've got the sinners. It's funny, you hear the word tax collector, and right off the bat, you kind of just, if you're not careful, you just kind of fly right through it. Tax collector. Nobody likes a tax collector. But tax collectors in that day, they were despised. Like, you're talking about used car salesman times 10, despised. Like, these guys were thieves in their eyes.
Right, because they were literally their own people selling themselves out to work for the Romans. And you were almost seen as a traitor at that point.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So in one sense, you've got the tax collectors and sinners, but they're leaning into the words of Christ. And then you have the Pharisees and the Sadducees who are sitting there judging. Did anything just kind of jump out in those moments between the two groups before we even got to the parable?
I mean, looking back in Scripture, Jesus had already compared the religious to whitewashed tombs. They look good on the outside. The words that they're speaking, the way they present themselves look good, but they're dead on the inside. And I think part of that was Jesus condemning them for, in front of man, keeping the religious rituals, but they were just as flawed as the folks that were sinning, and tax collectors and everybody else. They were holding fast more to tradition than they were what God had originally intended. We're looking more at the letter of the law and keeping the letter of the law as opposed to the intent of the law.
Yeah, absolutely. Ryan, as we kind of go through this parable, I'm just kind of thinking through the lens of the youth, the young adults. How could we paint a better picture so that they're able to grab that? Is there, and maybe the question that might be a little bit too vague. But then again, the question, we picture God as this shepherd that goes after the lost. And, surely that should impact our view of his love for you, love for me. I know Derek was sharing just in our private conversation today. Derek brought out a really good point because it was shared. Do you remember when you were lost? And that really impacted Derek. He was sharing that with me privately. He's like, but you know what? What was just as important is I also remember when I was found. And so coming back to my original question, I'm trying to think through, paint a picture, how could this best apply to our young adults so that they can grab something like this parable and run? Do you have some thoughts with that?
Yeah, absolutely. Youth and young adults especially, they're in a super vulnerable, moldable space where they're looking for answers. They're looking for somebody to give them the answers, especially once they graduate high school. And I've heard so many friends that have said, I was living on my parents' faith. And that's what's molded their worldview. But now that they're getting into this college atmosphere, they're getting their ideas molded by others that are around them, by their friends, by, if they're going to college, their professors. And it can be very disorienting, and it can make them feel lost. But being found is coming back to Christ, coming back to the one that knows you, coming back to the one that loves you.
Yeah.
And the best way, if you know somebody in your life that's lost and you want them to be found, is just intercession, interceding, just as the Father intercedes, just as Jesus intercedes for us on the right hand of the Father.
Sure. Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. I'm curious why it sometimes seems easier to stay with the 99 than go after the one. You guys have thoughts on that? I think, a lot of times churches, they get labeled as just staying within the walls. I think many people have heard, sayings like that where it's really about us, it's about our events, it's about our, gatherings of some sort, but there's really not that heart to go after the one, not that challenge to really go after friends, family, co-workers. And, I think one of the biggest things that was on my heart, especially coming into Sunday, is really looking at our contact list, because I've got to come up with my new one too. I shared with my neighbor, and I was like, yeah, praise God, this is so awesome. Yes, that's great. You made it to church. You're in a great church. You're connected. If you missed that story, you'll have to just jump over to Sunday morning's message. But now I've got to come up with another one. So in one sense, I was like, yes, praise God. And in another sense, I'm like, I got to find a new one. But I think there's a place of constantly challenging us, because if we don't challenge ourselves, it's easy to kind of get complacent. I think that's kind of the root of my question.
I think that's kind of where I would sit too, is complacency. We get the church built up, we start seeing some growth, we focus internally. We as the church in general, not necessarily this body, but the church in general, we start growing, we get big, we want to do some outreaches, but we focus more internally on who do we have, who do we keep. Let's make sure we minister, all the challenges that life brings to the congregation, and we lose focus of the one.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. If I have this weird look, I'm looking at Lisa, who's a moderator for our live chat. So she's constantly looking at questions that you may have. If you're watching this online or on Facebook, I might have to keep an eye on the chat. So if I got my phone on me, I'm not disinterested. I'm just kind of keeping an eye on my responsibility of chat. But if I had this odd look, just know I'm kind of communicating with a moderator as we go. But do you have any thoughts on what Sid shared with the complacency?
Yeah, absolutely. Even coming from an angle of young adults and youth, it's so easy to be comfortable with where you are, especially at that age group where as a youth, you're plugged into sports, you're plugged into so many extracurricular activities, and then as a young adult, you have your schedule of work, college, and making that decision to go after the one is a challenge because it puts risk in your face, and it says, hey, now there's something at risk. I have to give up a part of me to pursue the one.
Yeah, absolutely. I think if there's one area, and as I was reflecting on the message, I did hit this saying, but I wish I'd have maybe hit it a little bit better. I kind of wrapped it up with going after the one is how you find the more. And I wish I'd have done a better job kind of explaining that. I've found that, even the times where you're just having conversation with the wait staff, how can I pray for you? Man, you have no idea. Sometimes they just light up. You think it's going to be this scary process, and it's a little intimidating for you right off the bat because it's a little awkward at first. But man, I can't tell you how many great conversations that we've had in those moments, how many opportunities to pray. Just simply asking the waiter, hey, we're about to pray for a meal. How can we pray for you? But I know as focusing on that one, sitting down, having conversations with people, not necessarily this you've got 20 seconds to talk to this one person that you've had a friendship for 20 years. You got 20 seconds now, make sure that you have this turn or burn, get right or get left conversation. Yes, it's important to talk about the gospel, but so many times we've lost that art of relationship. We've lost that art of caring to some degree. And, I think sometimes just sitting down, having coffee. What's going on in your life? Tell me about the challenges that you're facing. What are the fears that are going on? What are you seeing in life that you enjoy? What's working in your life? What's not working in your life? Even just having those type of conversations with the end goal of, obviously presenting Christ, but sometimes people need to know that you care. And I think that's an important part of this, So I think going back to that original question, when I would have liked to have shared a little bit more, going after the one is how you find the more. Man, I tell you, so many times there is just a richness and a reward when you have those conversations, when you've poured your life into somebody, when you've poured your time into somebody, and they come alive. They get it. It's like that light bulb comes off, and then it's like, bing! I can't tell you how rewarding that is for you personally as a disciple of Christ. That's where, that's an opportunity for such a richness in your own life. So that's what I meant by the more. Do you guys have any thoughts on that?
Well, one of the thoughts that I had, we went to dinner with my mom last night, and her and my dad didn't go to church a lot. They were both confessed believers. But Lisa asked our waiter if we could pray for him last night. He didn't have a lot, just, health for the family and just a general. But my wife and my daughter instantly grabbed my mom's hand. And so in praying with that gentleman, it also witnessed to my mom that we're still engaged in this. We're still doing this. So it's more than sometimes blessing the wait staff when we're doing those things, because sometimes, and we've had instances where they broke down crying, oh, I need this, and we pray, and then they sit down and will sit down with us and then have a little conversation until they get a look, and then they have to get up and go back to work. But having those moments like that, even with friends or family that you're out to dinner with and you take that time, you witness to them as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
You have any thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. So I used to work at Amazon, and there was this guy when I worked there. He was in maintenance, and I just felt the Lord place him on my heart. So I started praying for him, and he walks up to me one day and he goes, "Why are you so happy?" So I was able to share through my joy the testimony of Christ with him, and he was my one at the time that I was interceding for. And I think sometimes, even just your actions, right? The word says that they will know you're Christians by your fruit. And so the fruits of joy, as they seep out of you, your one will start to notice.
Yeah, absolutely. Because they're paying attention.
Yeah.
They're paying attention whether you're in every action, in every statement, in everything that you do. They're watching, for sure, no doubt. Sounds like we do have a question. Go for it.
It was more of a statement that Sarah loved how you shared on sheep and how they just nibble their way into trouble. And the fact that if we go with our appetites, we get ourselves in trouble. Could you expand more on that?
Yeah, absolutely. Gosh, I think that's just human nature in a lot of different ways. I mean, I've done it in my own life. I can't say that most of us, I'd almost pretty much venture to say all of us have done that to some degree, right? It's easy to lose focus. It's easy to lose distraction. We live in a world that, we have our five senses. We have our mind, our will, and our emotions. And, there's a place of renewing our minds to think God's thoughts, which takes intention. It takes decisive action. It takes that mindset of, this is how I'm going to live my life. And the second you back off, the second you hold back or even put yourself in neutral if you're driving a car maybe, what you find is that intensity, that decisive, motivating factor that I'm going to follow the Lord, I'm going to follow His Word, that's going to be the guiding light in my life. The second you kind of back off that pedal in so many ways, it's just such human nature, this flesh, this mind, the will, the emotions, the distractions, especially that we have here in America, all the different things that we can get ourselves in trouble with. And it doesn't always have to be like this hardcore intentional sin sometimes. Sometimes it can just be the little things, scrolling through. Of course, I don't watch, I don't do, I got to be honest with you. I don't have social media, so I don't scroll through a whole lot. But I do recall the times that I did have it, and that's one of the reasons I don't have it, because I could easily find myself going an hour, 2 hours down the road. Is that necessarily bad or sinful? Well, depending on how you look at it, you could say that. But it's not like these hard, horrible things per se. But you spend an hour or two here, an hour or two there, an hour or two there, and AI starts nibbling at what it wants to feed you, and then you get distracted with that, and then next thing you're watching cat videos, and then that's leading you over here, and then you're at the whim because you're not focused. There's not that intentional, decisive action that I am going to walk this out, and so you just kind of nibble, and one little nibble leads to another nibble, and next thing you know, you're looking up, and you don't see the pack. The cares of this world have taken you away. They've distracted you. They've just swept your mindset away, and you're not with the pack anymore. So that would be my initial focus on that comment, and I appreciate the comment. Did you say Sarah? I'm wondering if that's my wife. Probably is. Thanks for the ad there, babe. Love you. See you in a little bit.
But something I would add to that is we've experienced with some friends that we had in Wyoming is you start reading after different people, and you get away from solely the Word or primarily the Word, and there's a lot of great authors out there. There's a lot of great pastors out there that are putting out a lot of material, but you fall into that one that you just get flawed material, and you start believing that, and it's just that 1 degree off. But 1 degree over a great distance carries you a long way off. And it could start just that one little flawed doctrine, and it just takes you a little bit off course at a time until you look back and you're, wait, what happened? How did I get over here when everybody else is over there?
Yeah, absolutely. You have any thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. Just like you guys are saying, it's so easy to get distracted, especially in today's day and age. You got the phones, like you're saying, doom scrolling. You got Netflix. You got all these different things vying for your attention. And sometimes it can be hard just to put the phone down and just sit in silence and just give God your all.
Yeah.
The Word says that what God desires is a broken and contrite heart.
Yeah.
And so putting that aside, the distractions aside, and giving your contrite heart, your broken heart to Christ is ultimately what He wants.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I see a couple comments. Terry, yes, you brought something out immediately after service. Terry's on comments, and she shared, not sure if I got your first part, but Do you remember how hard we search and worry over our lost pets? And I do recall you sharing about that, Terry, after service, and I thought, man, that is a really good point. That how diligent do you see some going after their lost pet? I mean, searching the neighborhood, you see the little signs up. You almost go into that panic to some degree. And if we're looking at that, just simply, if that's the emotion that we get from our pet, how much more, does God look at us through, us as His sheep? I thought that was a fantastic point. Well put, Terry. Thank you for reminding me of that comment. I thought that was awesome. Gabriel said, hey, I think we reciprocate what Jesus did for us. I was the one, and the Good Shepherd went back for me through my brother. Gabe, that's awesome. I absolutely love that. And, I think you might have a great feel for what Derek brought out. Do you remember when you were lost? But then also, do you remember when you're found? And you remember that with your brother. And I think that's an excellent comment as well. Lisa, do we have any additional comments? Are we good? Okay. Well, hey, so what do you think about this? What hesitations or fears keep us from pursuing that one sometimes? And how do we push past that, just those hesitations? Do you guys have any thoughts?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. I would say the biggest hesitation is, what do other people think about me? What are people going to think if I go talk to this person? Just an example that I can think of right now. We were driving, me and my dad, down Isleta, by the Isleta Casino. And we see this guy walking with a gasoline tank. And my dad said, this is kind of weird. Let's stop and let's talk to him. And so he got in the back, and it turns out he was a baby Christian, But if we would have thought, man, what would the people think that we're stopping, we're giving this guy a ride back to his car, we never would have had that encounter. And we got to pray for him for it. So I think that's the biggest hesitation, is what will people think of me?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a big
Or,
fear.
fear of not having the right words. Not believing in yourself enough that the word is enough in you, that you get to share that with other people.
Yeah.
So self-doubt, I guess.
Yeah. Assumption, I think, can be a factor in that, too. In fact, somebody had reached out to me this week. I didn't get their permission, so I'm gonna leave it in the they. But this individual shared with me that he or she enjoyed service, is newer to our Church Alive family, and really a friend of his or hers, was on their heart, and this person was dealing with some things relative to addiction. And the assumption was, I don't think they'd be interested in church. And so, lo and behold, right as this person was thinking that, they got a text from the other person. What you doing? Oh, well, I'm at church. Well, why haven't you invited me? That was a question. And so, how often do we make those assumptions of what people are going to say? It's very easy for us to do, especially in Western culture. Here, everyone's got their focus, their time, everything's designated, don't bother me, all the different things that we assume. But, I think it is so critical. I think the biggest thing for us to do is not even get to that point, per se, step one. I think step one is just finding out about a person. I just go through my contact list with my phone, and I think my next one is going to be old classmates from high school, 30 years ago. I know they're going through all kinds of things. And there's 3 of them individually that I'm really focused on, so I don't know who's going to be receptive. I got to get that feel. I got to have that kind of conversation and weigh that out. But I'm pretty sure that one of those 3 are going to be my one. And I'm going to sit down and have coffee with them. What's going on in your life? one of them just had a wife that passed away. Well, there's a lot of trauma there. There's a lot of pain. There's a lot of hurt. They need that person. They need me along their side to just help, encourage, and strengthen. Another one of my old classmates has dealt with alcohol, and so, another thing. And so, I think we also get in this hurry moment where it's just like, I've got to get that gospel presented. It's got to be right now. And yes, there's an urgency. I'm not disregarding that whatsoever. But sometimes you got to get that conversation going. You got to get that relationship established. You got to get that feeler in there to know where that receptivity is, because I think it's an important factor.
Absolutely. And going back to assuming what somebody or how somebody will respond, I was thinking back that I've seen a couple of times a post on one of the social media apps, and it has two gentlemen sitting on a bench. One of them's all like piercings and spiked hair and torn jeans and all that, and the other guy's business suit, all dressed to the nines, nice haircut. And it says, I wonder if they would accept Jesus. And it could be either one of those, getting ready to talk to the other one.
Yeah.
And so we based on appearances, we make presumptions. Are they going to receive from me based on the way that I look, based on the way they look? Can I even approach them?
Yeah.
And we make those presumptions before we defeat ourselves before we even engage.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. But I think you came back to an important thing. When we're identifying that one in our life, and we all have that one. You can go through your social media, and you can find that one. You can go through your phone contacts and your list. You can find that one. Generally, the Lord's already kind of leading you, even with just a little bit of time and prayer and just being quiet. Even the Lord will just pop 2 or 3 names right off the forefront of our thoughts. Really, what it's about is just being, having the diligence in some ways to just go, okay, you're leading in my heart. There's a reason for that. You don't always remember your classmate from 30 years ago, right? And so if they keep popping up in you, well, there's that sensitivity of being, okay, Lord, something's there. There's something that I need to focus on. And so do you have any other ideas on maybe how to identify that one? Obviously, I think what you mentioned was that prayer and that reflection, which I think is so critical. You guys have any other thoughts and really how to narrow down that one?
Well, I had one for a while, and I do need to reach out to him again. But I had a mutual friend, and she gave me his name and said, hey, he went through this bad breakup. He was with his girlfriend for a while. Things are not good. Things kind of fell apart. And he needs a guy friend. And so I reached out to him. We set a time and just went and had coffee. And so sometimes the Lord will give you that one through somebody else. They're like, oh, well, you'll reach them better than I will. And maybe that is what God asks us to do.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So, Ryan, you must have a family member named Joel Ortiz. I'm assuming you knew who that is, right? He let out a comment on Ryan's Amazon story. Good verse to correlate the 1 Peter 3:15. But in your hearts, honor Christ the Lord as holy, always being prepared to make a defense to anyone who asks you for a reason for the hope that is in you. Yet do it with gentleness and respect. That is an outstanding verse, and certainly a great reminder. Joel, you want to give Joel a shout out?
Yeah, that's my brother. He lives in New York.
That's your
so
brother
glad
in
you're
New York.
tuning in.
That's fun.
Yeah, no, I think you hit it perfectly on the head. That was very good.
Cool. Well, Joel, you're always welcome to chime in and chat and interact with us at any time. So glad you're jumping in. So got to identify that person in our life. We've got to be willing to identify, but then also we got to take that step. And this is where that intentionality, this is where that decision comes into place. This is the coffee invite. This is the text. Hey, just checking in on you. What's going on? You know, this is that act of kindness. For my neighbor, I knew when he was going to be outside, so it was that intentional walk down the street with the dog that is pretty defensive of the house. I knew he was, pretty kind, but his dog is mean. And you got to kind of, so there's that apprehension. But, so thankful that made the decision in that step. And so, really encourage, and I wanted your guys' thought on that. What are ways to kind of take that step to get beyond just your fears and apprehensions that we talked about?
Nike has an excellent motto that I love.
Yes.
Just do it.
Yep. I knew it was coming.
I think so many times, like for me, one of my favorite sayings that I've heard was slow obedience is disobedience. And when I heard that for the first time, that really resonated with me.
Yeah, that really actually goes back to the drifting a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, whenever the Lord's putting something on your heart. For me, if I'm kind of like, maybe that's not the Lord, how I'll know it's Him is my hands start getting sweaty, I start getting shaky, I feel this like nervousness.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, this is the Lord, I have to go do this. So really the best way to get over that and really to evangelize to people is just to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And at some point I told my wife I'd never even go to a church, and so many years later I'm ordained through an organization. I get to participate here, and it's fantastic. And so again, it's stepping out in faith, like being obedient, and just doing. Jesus called us. That's one of the first things that we learn. And one of the congregants had asked you about that. What is the Great Commission? But that's one of the first things we learn.
Yeah.
Go into all the world and preach the gospel. Spread the gospel. That's one of the first things that we're told. You love Christ, get everybody else to love Christ. But facing that rejection and just, the Lord told me to do this, and just putting it back in His hands.
Yeah.
And saying, okay, I trust you. You're going to give me the words. I'm going to approach this person. And if they're not receiving you, it's not because they're not receiving me. It's because they're not receiving you. And just making that attempt and letting the Lord deal with the rejection.
Yeah.
That's good.
Absolutely. I think one other factor, too, is we've got to celebrate the wins. Reaching out, reaching into our community, when we have those success stories, when we have those fun moments, we got to celebrate them. I know in our life teams, Pastor Sherry and Barbara Regan have really been faithful with us as we have gone in the malls, and it's actually pretty entertaining with the three of us because we all have our spots and we all have our relationships that we've developed. And so it's gotten to the point now where it's kind of comical because we're like, oh, yep, I got to go see AQ at the Nissan store. I got to go. And all three of us are just like, boof. Because we've developed relationships with people, and maybe it hasn't fully, matured into that decision for Christ. But they see that. They see that consistency. They see that care. And I tell you, even just celebrating, like, yeah, I got to go see AQ at the Nissan store. Like, even that, it's simple. There's not much to it. But even those small things, they can be celebrated. But especially the big celebrations, those big moments when, we all need to collectively rejoice and celebrate over those things because it becomes contagious. When one catches a glimpse of it, litmus, that temperature gauge just starts to rise. It becomes contagious for all of us. We're like, okay, well, let's go conquer the next one. So, that's one thing that we need to really encourage our congregation with is celebrate those moments. Another thing I would encourage, too, if this is intimidating for you to take those steps, have somebody that you're with. Jesus sent them out 2 by 2, and we've seen this even within the life teams. Especially when you're making those really odd, you don't know a person, and it's really intimidating to go up and like, hey, how's it going? What's going on? Having 2 people, you don't want a big group because it, scares the stew out of somebody. But when you're with 2, there's kind of this accountability thing going on, which is like, yep, we're doing this. We're going to do this together. And you kind of, something about it just kind of forces one of the 2 of you to kind of go thunk and have those conversations. And so if this is very intimidating for you, if the assumptions are there, if the fears are there, I'd encourage, have an accountability partner. Have somebody that you're like, okay, you and I, we're going to do this. Here's my 1. I'm hoping to get your 1. And then I'm going to check in with you. Like next week, did you talk to your 1? It doesn't necessarily mean it's like this conversation of, did you bring him to Christ that day? But did you start reaching out to your 1? Maybe that's the first step. And so, having that person, and I know my intention is I'm going to do that especially with our coordinators. Like, hey, guys, who's your 1? Who's the one that you're going to be focused on? Here's my 1. This is the one I'm going to be focused on. And hopefully we always have that 1 in our life because it's so critical.
And I've got more than 1 that I'm focused on because I've got several clients at work, and I'm trying to get the chapel up and running. I'm trying to get the chaplaincy running at work so we can affect 40, 50 people at a time. But keeping in mind the 1, and I've had my brother for years now, and it seems like the more I press in on him, the more he rejects it and pushes back on it.
Yeah.
But then he hits those critical times.
And who's he calling?
When things happen, and we just happen to be shooting ducks on the riverside, and he's like, hey, I've got this going on. I've got all this stuff, all this turmoil. Why would God allow this? Why that? How come this?
Yeah.
And just giving those calm, peaceful answers, answering the questions, even if it's, I don't know. But being there, listening, trying to answer some of the theological rebuttals that he has in a compassionate way, and just allowing him to take those steps.
Yeah.
Because we water, it's God that brings the increase.
Yep. Absolutely. Eva, see you on there. Celebrate the wins. Love it when God starts moving on the scenes. Yep. Absolutely. Sounds like we have one more story. We are going to try to keep these to about 45 minutes. So, do we have one more question out there? We good? Okay. All right. Well, I think we're at 45 minutes. So, I believe we are good. Do you have any final thoughts as we wrap up tonight?
Yeah, I would just say, don't underestimate the power of intercession. I've been praying for a few people to see some changes in their life, and intercession works. When you intercede on behalf of somebody else, the Lord really works on your behalf.
Yeah, that's a great point. Very important. You always have that tool in your arsenal. And, I think that's even, especially because I think there's many moms out there, there's many parents that when they think of the 1, they're thinking of their loved one. They're thinking of their child. They're thinking of those hard stories, those hard scenarios. And you better believe that, intercession has got to have to be a big part of that. But even in some circles, your 1 could very well be your very own child. You could be your very own family member within your circles. And absolutely, I 1,000% agree with you. the importance of intercession, absolutely.
My one takeaway would probably be consistency. Staying consistent in the Word, staying consistent with the way you interact with those people, that one, those 5, whatever it is. The consistent interactions, the consistency in bringing Christ to the forefront, the consistency in not pushing them, but sharing with them. But yeah, just being consistent.
Yeah, absolutely. Terry shared, yes, as P. Sherry always says, we plant seeds, and then time of watering, then harvest. Yep, and some plant, some water, but it's God that gives the increase. But our job is to sow those seeds. Absolutely appreciate Sid's comment about they aren't rejecting me, they're running from Jesus. Absolutely. Great point, Terry. Appreciate that for sure. So, hey, we hope you enjoyed not only Sunday's message on the 99, the parable of the 99, but also the recap, and really hope to bring that practical application to the message and really make sure that we did Sunday's message due diligence. Shout out to all of y'all who hopped on and interacted and asked the questions. Thank you so much. That really is a heartbeat of what we want to try to achieve here. We want to answer those questions so that you can apply these principles to your everyday life. We want to stay kind of focused in the content of Sunday morning. I don't really want it to wander all over the place, but I do want to make sure that everyone has a good bearing on the questions that they need answered as it pertains to the content that was delivered. And so thank you all so much for going on this journey with us. I encourage you to join with us on Sunday. We're going to continue this focus on the one for the next 3 weeks. This upcoming message is going to be focused on the parable of the lost coin, which doesn't always it's not common to be talked about too much. And so we're going to continue this conversation even more. And then we'll be moving into the parable of the prodigal son. And there's actually 2 sons that need to be discussed in that parable.